All right, the events in Egypt have had and will have an enormous global impact. With us right now, our chief political analyst, Carl Jeffers. Why don't we address the issue that Chuck brought up to begin with?
Were you surprised by this?
I was surprised to know that he was going to make the statement, but now that I've heard the statement, there's actually some prolific truth to it. The reality is that down the road, the new final Egyptian government may very well be less influenced by the U.S. than was the Mubarak government. And so in that sense, what he is saying is looking sort of as a prophecy of a more independent Middle East. And I think that's an important point.
But when we saw this happen in Iran, there weren't the moderates who took over, but more hardline religious groups took over. What do you see in terms of a future for Egypt? Who do you see stepping in to fill the void?
Well, I think, first of all, I think we have to distinguish between the Sunni and Shia governments, and that Egypt and its people are far less susceptible to an Islamic influence in terms of government than was in Iran. I think right now, Mohammed al-Baradei is the most likely national leader to take over. Remember, President Mubarak earlier this week was handing over major powers to Vice President Suleiman. The military rescinded those powers, withdrew them, and now will reserve those powers for itself until it decides. Al-Baradei then, as a result, becomes more potentially powerful than Suleiman, who is considered to have been part of the repressive regime.
And he, of course, is the Nobel laureate, correct?
Al-Baradei is. Al-Baradei is. And most interestingly, right on Meet the Press on NBC last Sunday, Al-Baradei said whoever winds up in power in Egypt will want to revisit the Egyptian-Israeli peace treaty. Now, here's the thing. On one hand, you have anyone in power is going to revisit that agreement. On the other hand, Mubarak had no inclination to revisit that agreement. So which of those options represents more peace for the U.S.?
Which is why the Israelis are so concerned about what happens here.
Right.
What about the spirit of this revolution, the spirit of independence, the spirit of freedom, spreading to other nations? Let's even go into our own southern hemisphere in Venezuela, where we got Hugo Chavez down there.
Sure.
Any chance that this could spread down there, or is that just a true dictatorship? And
I think that in the case of Venezuela specifically, very little chance, because that's a true authoritarian dictatorship. Remember, in Egypt, Egypt has the highest percentage of educated citizens of any country in the Middle East. Their problem was the problems of a global economic recession. And so as a result, they had more educated people, unemployed, sitting around at the universities, and that festered the kind of resentment.
What about Syria?
Syria, on the other hand, does have the potential for this, because there you have the kind of repressiveness and the close proximity to other countries in the Middle East, where their population, without question, has less respect for the royal family than some of the other countries, and that is a possibility.
Do you see this being a wave of change or really a tsunami?
I think it's a wave of change. For instance, I do not see this spreading to the point of Saudi Arabia or Jordan. As a matter of fact, King Abdullah, and we should point this out, earlier this week in a telephone conversation, admonished President Obama for what Abdullah felt, King Abdullah felt, was his lack of support continuing for President Mubarak. And so it is important to recognize that what is making many in our country excited about the possibilities for democracy is making many in the Middle East nervous about the prospects, and that's why we have to be concerned long term.
You know, somebody we haven't seen, and Colleen mentioned this, in all of this is our Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton.
Actually, Hillary Clinton has been more directly involved than even the president, in fact, in some ways, because she's been doing the back channeling. Remember, there have been 3 different speeches by President Mubarak this week where he gave conflicting signals. I'm either stepping back or I'm not. In every one of those, the reaction was to get Secretary Clinton on with other leaders in the Middle East, and she and those leaders worked out an arrangement. Here's the most important point about what happened here. People are focusing on the military having taken over. This is not a military coup. The military did not overthrow Mubarak. In fact, the military would have been comfortable with Mubarak because he is of the military. The military, however, did not want to see a disintegration of Egyptian society, and they were not going to fire on their own people. So they had to confront him and said that this is why you have to go, not because we don't like you, but because the society's goodwill and peace is at stake here.
You mentioned one possible successor. What about, and this is a long shot here, what about that 30-year-old Google executive who spent 12 days in jail and really is seen as a martyr through all of this. What about him as a long shot?
Well, I think if we can have in America the chances for dark horses to come out of primaries and be successful, we certainly can't rule that out. I would say as a general conclusion, though, Colleen, that overall, the further out the elections are, the better off we are in terms of the results being a victor who is comfortable with the Israeli peace agreement and with the U.S. The closer the elections are, the more likely someone who may not be as comfortable as we would like them to be with those existing arrangements might win.
Carl, unfortunately, I could listen to you all day
long.
And your enthusiasm is contagious, but we have to move along. But thank you very much for making us part of it.
Nice to see you again.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, still ahead as we continue with our special report, the media's role in the political unrest in Egypt.